If you feel everything, you might be carrying a burden that was never yours to bear. I'm not here to talk about being a highly sensitive person. We're here to uncover something far older, a hidden pattern living beneath the shallow label of Empath. What the modern world sells as a gentle gift is, in its truest form, an immense and dangerous responsibility. It is not simply feeling for others. It is becoming a living channel for the world's unconscious pain. And if you are not aware of this dynamic, it will consume you. The popular idea has been stripped of its power, made safe and small. The true empath, as understood through ancient wisdom, is not a comforting spiritual idea. They are a weeper of unshed tears, an echo of forgotten sorrows, often completely unaware of the forces that have taken residence within them. To grasp this, you must look beyond psychology, beyond the personal story. The empath is not just tuned to people's emotions. They are unconsciously open to the primal, archetypal currents moving through those people. Picture an old forest shaman, kneeling as the trees begin to sicken, feeling a fever that is not their own. That is the empath. They process energies they did not create. They carry what does not belong to them, and without conscious understanding of this role, they are destined to be consumed by it. Long ago, I had a vision. A figure stood on a cliff's edge, hands outstretched, face turned upward, sightless. Below, in the abyss, was a chorus of longing, grief, and rage. The figure could not see the source, but their body flinched with every cry, as if struck. That is the unconscious empath. The blindness is not to the world, but to the origin of their own suffering. They cannot tell where others end and they begin. They are an open receiver, but no one taught them how to filter the signal. To be an open vessel with own wisdom is perilous. The unconscious realm is not moral, it is raw energy, both creative and chaotic. When an empath, whether through compassion or simple permeability, opens to another psychic material, they invite in the unprocessed fragments of that person's shadow. Most people walk through life dragging unseen histories behind them. That which is rejected in one soul will seek a home in another. The unguarded empath becomes that refuge. There is an old tale from traditions that understand the dream world. A young one would walk at twilight and hear not words, but surges of emotion, sudden dread, inexplicable joy, profound loss. They began to weep without cause, to shake in silent rooms. The elders did not banish the spirits. They taught the dreamer to listen, to ask questions. This is the crucial lesson. To have empathy without discernment is to become a host for disowned energies. But to have empathy and the skill to name what you feel, that is the path of transformation. You might think, I just feel deeply. But you must ask, why do I feel this? Where does it enter me? And what am I meant to do with it? Because this kind of empathy can be a quiet form of possession. The unconscious is cunning. It doesn't always arrive as a monster. Sometimes it comes as a compassion so deep it paralyzes you. Sometimes it comes as a need to fix that shreds your own limits. Sometimes it comes as love for someone whose hidden wounds have mistaken your soul for their burial ground. I have witnessed empaths fall in love with their own destroyers, not from foolishness, but because they were hypnotized by the other's pain. They felt the ache and in feeling it became the caretaker, the silent savior. But there is a hidden transaction here, a reversal. The healer becomes the patient. The light bearer becomes a dwelling for another's shadow. And over time, the empath forgets the sound of their own inner voice. If this is your reality, you must see your ability is not merely emotional. It is perceptual and archetypal. You are sensitive not just to feelings, but to the ancient stories playing out in humanity. When someone meets your gaze, you don't just see their smile. You sense their lineage, their silent gods, their unlived dreams. And unless you have first journeyed into your own depths, you will be overrun. There's a temptation to wear sensitivity like a badge of honor. But in the realm of the soul, no profound capacity is only light. All profound light creates a shadow, and empathy, more than most, draws that shadow to the surface. What happens when someone buries their fury for a lifetime? It does not vanish. It waits in the unseen field. And when that person meets an empath, especially one who has not faced their own repressed anger, that fury can leap. It jumps like a spark to dry tinder. The empath, overwhelmed, may feel suddenly irritable, inflamed or heavy, never knowing they are carrying a fire that isn't theirs. I once sat with someone who wept constantly. She believed her tears were her own ancient pain, and some were. But as we descended, a deeper truth emerged. She was carrying the ungrieved mourning of her mother, her grandmother, a line of women forbidden to weep. She had become the vessel for a generational story. In holding their sorrow, she had lost the language for her own. If you do not separate what is yours from what is theirs, you will drown in a sea of unnamed ghosts. The capacity to feel is sacred, but the sacred demands a strong container. The cup must be strong enough to hold the wine, or the wine is wasted. Another vision comes to mind. A person in a hall of polished stone, every surface a mirror. With each step, unfamiliar whispers rise. They look into one mirror and see a terrified child. In another, a furious warrior. In another, a dying elder. All these faces stare back, and the person screams, "Which one is me?" But the mirrors only reflect. This too is the empath, lost in the reflections of other people's inner worlds, forgetting the face they wore before they started feeling for everyone else. If this strikes a chord, you must ask, what work have I done to know my own core? Not with positive labels, but in the furnace of honest self-confrontation. Have you stood in your own darkness and spoken to what you find there? Have you admitted the part of you that uses empathy to feel significant or even holy? Have you faced the subtle satisfaction of being the only one who understands another's agony? Yes, even the empath is not free from hidden motives. Sometimes helping others is a way to avoid the self, Sometimes the weight of everyone's suffering is easier to bear than the quiet of your own solitude. We are strange beings. We often dress our avoidance in the clothes of virtue, and the unconscious, ever watchful nods in recognition. Empathy is not salvation. It is a doorway. To walk through it wisely, you must learn the craft of boundaries. Not the rigid walls of fear, but the intelligent, permeable membrane of a soul that knows itself. To say, I sense you, but I am not you. To say, I see your wound, but I will not live inside it. To say, I offer my attention, not my essence. This, I believe, is the I believe not to absorb the other, but to witness them. The great tragedy for the empath is to become invisible to themselves, to merge so completely with another story that their own soul becomes a faint rumor. And this happens daily in partnerships, where one person carries the other's emotional weather, in families where the sensitive child becomes the silent regulator for the whole household, in healers who confuse compassion with a loss of self. This is not just codependence, it is archetypal possession. The empath without the anchor of inner work gets absorbed by the wounded healer pattern. When this archetype rises unexamined, it begins to believe its purpose is found in suffering. One starts to think they are meant to age, that their worth is tied to their capacity to endure alongside others. This is a distortion. It is the shadow of the healer, where identity gets bound to pain, not the conscious, transformative pain of growth, but the endless cycle of serving the brokenness of others. The empath loses agency not from love, but because the pattern has taken the reins. You must understand, these archetypes are not just ideas. They are living currents of psychic energy, older than civilization. When you feel irresistibly pulled to help, when you leave a room drained, when you feel a flash of pride in being needed, pause. These may not be simply your feelings. They may be the voice of an ancient force speaking through you, the rescuer, the martyr, the eternal parent. These can slip into the unconscious empath and move them like a marionette on invisible strings. But puppets do not become whole, they only perform. To become whole, the empath must undertake the vital, daring act of separation. Separation not from love, not from presence, but from fusion. This is not coldness. It is warmth with a backbone. It is standing before another storm and saying, I will not leave you, but I will not drown for you. It is feeling the tsunami of their grief and saying, I will sit on the shore with you, but I will not become the ocean. An image arises, an ancient forest, roots woven through time. At its heart, a well with no bottom. Around it sit men and women, hands pressed to their chests, weeping. And in the well, the shadows of those they cherish, they peer in, believing that if they care enough, cry enough, they can draw those shadows into the light. But the well is bottomless, and their tears only make it deeper. This is what happens when empathy becomes a compulsion. It feeds the very darkness it hopes to heal. For here is a secret few admit, not everyone wishes to be healed. Not every soul is ready to wake. And the empath who mistakes their gift for a duty will spend a lifetime trying to drag the unwilling from the depths, and in doing so, be pulled down themselves. You must learn to discern. Does your empathy bring freedom or a cage? Does it honor the other's journey, or violate it by demanding they be somewhere else? Even healing can become control when it springs from fear. There are parents whose deep feeling becomes smothering, lovers whose attunement becomes manipulation, friends whose care masks a need to be indispensable. All this is empathy's shadow, where feeling becomes a form of power. True empathy is not the taking on of pain, but the witnessing of it without losing your center. You might recoil. Not me, you think. But if you are truly gifted this way, you must turn that perception inward. Ask, where has my ability become a disguise? Where have I confused connection with depth? Where have I made myself essential to others to avoid the silence of my own company? This is not an accusation, it is the road to wholeness. For real empathy is the art of standing in the fire of another's suffering and remaining unburned. Not through detachment, but through being so deeply rooted in your own self that you cannot be uprooted. And what is this self? It is the complete totality of who you are. Light and shadow, history and future, instinct and dream. The self is the still point, the living core around which these ancient patterns orbit. When the empath finds this core, they cease to be a passive receiver. They become an anchor, and from that anchored place genuine compassion flows. Not as a sacrifice, but as a strength. But this path demands a descent. The empath must go down into the underworld of their own psyche. They must meet the parts that love being needed, that are so terrified of abandonment they merge to feel safe, that mistake intimacy for a loss of boundary. These are not failures. They are survival strategies, often carved in childhood, when sensitivity was either punished or used. I have known those whose empathy was born in trauma, a child learning to read a parent's rage to stay safe, a child attuning to a caregiver's despair to offer a moment of peace. These children became empaths not from grace, but from necessity. That necessity forged a hyper-vigilance they later called a gift. But a gift born from fear must be purified. You must ask, who was I before the world told me to feel for others first? What part of me still believes love must hurt? What would happen if I stopped absorbing the pain around me? Who would I be then? And would I still be loved? These are not intellectual questions. They are gates of initiation. And here, the empath meets their trial to feel deeply and remain intact, to have an open heart and a strong spine, to love without bleeding out, to help without becoming hollow, to see the world's sorrow and not be defined by it. This is not detachment, it is mastery. Let me offer one last image. A figure stands before a great blaze, in their hands a bowl, around them a tempest rages, visions of anguish, cries of injustice. But they do not tremble. They place the bowl on the earth. It holds only their own tears. They kneel and whisper, not to the storm, but to their own soul. I feel you, but I am not you. And in that moment, the storm begins to settle. Not because they absorbed it, but because they ceased fighting for their own sovereignty. This is the true empath, not a sponge, but a vessel. Not a martyr, but a witness. Not a savior, but a clear mirror. To those who see themselves in these words, who find their own dreams filled with symbols of over, giving and sacred exhaustion, I say this not as a judgment, but as a call. Step back from the shadows that are not yours. Turn inward. Confront the silence you've been fleeing. Speak to the parts of you that merge to survive. Honor them. Then gently release them. You are not a sacrifice. You are not a sanctuary for ghosts. You are a living threshold, a place where energy meets awareness, where pain is met but not swallowed, where empathy is forged into wisdom. If you can hold this delicate, fiery clarity, you will not just survive your sensitivity. You will sanctify it. You will walk among ghosts and no longer be haunted. You will witness pain without performing penance. You will feel without falling. And most importantly, you will return to yourself, not as a rescuer, but as a soul, whole and awake. And if this journey resonated with you, help this message reach others who need to hear it. Like this video and follow Wake and Win for more guides on turning your deepest sensitivities into your greatest strength.